Flash of light, flash of hope, build your dream on destiny song. It can be done when you truly know the mind of right and wrong. So don't pretend a fallen friend, you know the way to go. Or that you are so. Our teaching today is the Hermetic Vanetic marriage in relationship to evolutionary mortal marriages based upon an example of the Creator Son and the Universe Mother Spirit in complementary relationship. And for those of you who don't know who the Creator Son is, it's Jesus Christ Michael. Just a few of these concepts come from a wonderful teacher by the name of Manly P. Hall and his Philosophical Research Society in California, where he established a school of philosophy. But the majority of these teachings today is actually continuing fifth epochal revelation and comes through Paladin the Finauter to Telly Esfand, me, in Divine Administration in Tumacacre, Arizona, and started in Sedona, Arizona, over 30 years ago. This will become paper 366 in the Cosmic Family, Volume 6, in which only 2 volumes are published at this time. We are going to share some of that paper today. A definition of Hermetic marriage is Hermeticism, also called Hermetism, is a religious, philosophical, and esoteric tradition based primarily upon writings attributed to a man called Hermes Trismegistus, relating to an ancient occult tradition encompassing alchemy, astrology, theosophy, and male and female polarities in marriage. A definition of Vanetic is the writings of Van, pre-rebellion and post-rebellion era. Van wrote for 300,000 years before the rebellion on the relationship of the Creator Son and the Universe Mother Spirit in relationship to evolutionary marriages. Most of the writings of Van were destroyed when the Library of Alexandria burnt down. A tremendous loss to our planet. Because of that fire, very few people remembered who Van was. And not until the Urantia book was printed did it mention Van again. Continuing fifth epochal revelation teaches that as a result of the romantic relationship between the Creator Son and Universe Mother Spirit, their universe was actually sung into existence. A wonderful and beautiful picture of romance where two harmonized together to bring through matter, physical matter, and called the universe of Nebadon. Everything, every particle, every rock, every tree, the oceans, everything was sung into existence. This relationship between the two of them is the example of relationships between angelic beings, the positive and the negative, a duality, and the example on evolutionary worlds of the goal for complementary relationships between mere mortals. See the Urantia book, paper 33, section 3, The Universe and Spirit, for more information on this subject. Throughout the history of the Urantia, sages and adepts and master teachers have taught the principles of masculine and feminine polarities joining with each other to create harmonic creations and writings and pictured in art. Starting in the book of Genesis, we see the example of male and female polarity with the teachings of Adam and Eve actually being made from the rib of Adam, to show a close union between the two of them as the example of the evolutionary races and how they evolved. In all of the cultures, there are examples of male and female gods and deities, as well as in the mythologies of other countries and races such as the Greeks and Zeus and Athena. In Egyptian mythology, there is the teachings of Isis and Osiris, the male and the female deities, who also represent the Creator's Son and the Universe Mother Spirit, from the teachings in the Venetic history of Urantia. But in actuality, Isis and Osiris are representative of the teachings of Van from the pre-rebellion era. As we all know, as Urantia book students, the teachings of Van is a well-known concept among Urantia book readers. But Urantia book readers do not particularly understand the Venetic teachings of Van outside of the Urantia book that he wrote for 300,000 years on this planet. That was again destroyed at the Library of Alexandria, started by Alexander the Great. So by Urantia book readers not reading and understanding continuing fifth epical revelation, they miss a lot. There is also the House of Osiris, which is one of the hidden esoteric mysteries of the beginning teachings of the cosmic family. This morning I talked about how we can correct each other very lovingly, correct each other because we know each other, we love each other. We don't have to have a psychologist or a psychiatrist that you may go to tell you you may be thinking wrong, doing something wrong. We can do it ourselves. Why? Because we're family. And family knows they love each other. So we can let our hair down around each other. It's what I was teaching this morning. The whole concept of duality in male and female, what do husband and wives do? Correct each other all the time, right? Sometimes it's done incorrectly, and that's why we have to grow and learn how to correct each other. And other times it's done very lovingly. And the man, the male of the two, just like Creator Son and Universe Mommy, has the responsibility of being the one to do the first correcting if necessary. Throughout history and art, the thrones are L-shaped and point west and east and represent the beginning and the end, the rising of the sun. and the closing and coming down of the sun, birth and death, beginning and end, Alpha and Omega, completion and beginning, all within the context of male and female divine marriage. Birth being the creatures created by a divine romance. Every child that's brought forth through a mother and father, through a husband and wife, should be a divine dance, a divine romance, a divine birth. And when you understand that principle, and when you get to that level, you can bring through a higher order of starseed. Urantia book readers know that Adam and Eve were actually a material son and daughter from another solar system. The example of the Bible is very beautiful, however, that Eve came from the rib of Adam. But that isn't exactly true. They came to this planet by choice from another solar system to teach the evolutionary races and give the evolutionary races on this fallen world called Urantia their genetics. You know, science right now is trying to understand what genetics is. And they're at a beginning level, very, very beginning level of understanding genetics and how important genetics is. So both Hermes and Venetics actually are teaching about male and female genetics and how it works in a marriage and the bringing forth of children through that marriage. So the idea of complementary relationships is just beginning to come back to Urantia because it was lost at Alexandria in the library there, which was a great loss to this planet. Thoth Hermes was the Egyptian god of wisdom, learning, and science. It was the beginning, actually, of ascension science that is taught today in the University of Ascension Science and the Physics of Rebellion. People from the outside hear those words, but it goes right over their heads. Because you have to put it all together to really understand it. You have to go back pre-rebellion to Venetics. Some say that Thoth Hermes was a contemporary of Moses because the writings seem to be so much alike. Some scholars even claim that Moses and Hermes were indeed the same person, which is correct. They were. So the Hermetic and Vanetic teachings are actually the same soul. Some people don't have any understanding of any of this. That's why I'm teaching it today. Van was also called by many other names. Hermes Trismegistus and Mercurius Maximus. This soul dominated the philosophical and literary thought of the ancient world. So Van was always known in the ancient world. When people read the writings of Van, they knew it was Van. Today, only in the Urantia book is Van talked about. But he was talked about for hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years on this planet. And the evolutionary races knew, believe me, who Van was. And some even knew his higher name, Taliesfan. But this is not the time to go into that. This soul dominated the philosophical and literary thought of all higher students of spirituality and metaphysical teachings. His very name became synonymous with wisdom. Today you think of synonymous with wisdom, Confucius, Lao Tse. If you look at the life of Van and who he was, this speculation by the scholars is probably a fact because readers of continuing Fifth Epoch of Revelation knew who Moses was. They connect the dots. And so Hermes is also bringing through continuing Fifth Epoch of Revelation and brought through the beginning of Fifth Epoch of Revelation called the Urantia book. Still mystery. It's only a mystery if you're not on a higher psychic circle. If you're on the 4th to the 7th psychic circle, you have no understanding of the past history of Venetic writings on this planet. When you're on the 3rd circle, you're beginning to put the dots together. You're just beginning to put the dots together. With his teachings today, to those at the University of Ascension Science and the Physics of Rebellion, you will better understand who's teaching you right now. Hermes knew of the relationship of the Creator Son and the Universe Mother Spirit, and all his writings reflected the fact because he was Van, the soul of Van. We know that Hermes was not a god. He never said he was. But he was a superhuman mortal. And some, even at the time of Hermes, thought he was a master, a teacher, an adept. Scholars say that during the life of Hermes Trismegistus, he wrote holy books that all dealt with, in some manner, the marriage of man and woman that became known as the Hermetic marriage. But it was just the same teachings that Van taught of the relationship between our mommy and daddy of Nebadon, the universe, Creator Son, and the universe, Mother Spirit. So, again, who was Hermes? Continuing Fifth Epoch of Revelation says that Van himself wrote many, many writings and books before the fall of Caligastia and taught about the relationship between the Creator Son and the Universe Mother Spirit to the evolutionary races long before he was incarnated as Hermes in Egypt. And I keep on emphasizing that fact because all of those writings, again, were lost to this world with the fire in Alexandria and the library there. One of our cosmic family members, Raphael, who was here with us for many, many years before he went to the other side, had a master's degree in library science, and he was also Ptolemy, who put together and helped register those books in the Alexandria Library. And he did the same thing when he incarnated back here with us. Same thing. A lot of the books we have right now in our library were registered and put in order, hundreds and hundreds of books by Ptolemy, by Raphael. Every scholar in ancient times, every adept in ancient times, every higher student of spiritual understanding knew what I'm telling you right now. It was like a common knowledge. Now, a light bulb's going off in some of your heads. A light bulb's going off in those students here at the University of Ascension Science and the Physics of Rebellion. And I'm bringing this teaching to the world through YouTube and other ways because light bulbs have to go off all over the world of who Van is. And 144,000, a little less, 100 less, has to go off because they need to come to planetary sacred home, just like they had to come to Dalmatia hundreds of thousands of years ago. So, on every continent of Urantia, Van is calling out to you to come to divine administration because this is your destiny. You cannot escape it. You will have to come here or default in your calling because the Lord himself is soon to come back here. That's Christ Michael, in case you don't know. It's Jesus, in case you don't know. Same name. Just like Van was called by many names, Christ Michael is Jesus. It's no mystery. It's a well-known fact. All throughout his universe that he created called Nebadon. It's just those on Urantia who are confused. The ancient yellow race that became China have the understanding even of mandates and divine choice given to human beings to fulfill their destinies. They connected destinies with being part of the mandate because basically destiny reservists are part of the mandate. Everyone in this room right now is part of the mandate of what? Bright and morning star. Who is the bright and morning star? The firstborn son of mommy and daddy. Of the universe creator son and the universe mother spirit. So we all together are in a way, a divine marriage. They understood the chemistry of life. And it is indeed chemistry. In relationship to male and female, husband and wife, uncle and aunt, cousin, grandmother, grandfather, to each other in a higher way than just what they understand in three-dimensional understanding. There's a higher relationship that we ought to have with each other and know who we are and our relationship to one another than just the average planet. Why? Because in this experimental planet right now, on Urantia, that had 2 rebellions, this little group of people right now is the first fruits of the destiny reservists of the 144,000 mentioned in the book of Revelations in the New Testament. And mentioned, of course, in Cosmic Family Volume 1 and on. What is Cosmic Family Volume 1? It's Van bringing back his Venetic writings. I'll say that again. What is continuing fifth epochal revelation? It's Van bringing back to Urantia his Venetic writings that was lost in the teachings, lost in the Library of Alexandria in Egypt. Why did Alexander choose Egypt? Anybody ever think of that? Was it an accident? He could have put it in Greece, right, where he's from. Could have put it anywhere he conquered. But he wanted to put it in Egypt. Why? Because the ancient teachings that's in the Great Pyramid of Giza talked about the first stages of light and life. It's written. You think, oh, it just came in the Urantia book. Alexander knew about the first stage of light and life. So did a lot of great people of that time who studied philosophy and studied spirituality, studied metaphysics. They knew about the first stage of light and life coming because it was already taught in ancient Egypt. And those who read those writings read the writings of Van, that you might say was stored away in the Great Pyramid of Egypt. They understood this chemistry, spiritual chemistry, in relationship to male and female, mommy and daddy, creator son and creator mother. And in every continent, they also had a female goddess, particularly in China, who was a virgin, called Kuan Yin. Kuan Yin was a precursor, you might say, to the Virgin Mary. The concept of a divine being coming to this earth through a mother, a virgin, would bring through a divine son. She was also called the Good Mother. She'd have to be good to bring through a divine son, wouldn't she? And this was long before Mary was ever born. Long before she ever brought through Jesus. The concept was brought to this world through a little guy from Pittsburgh. The soul of Van. And his teachings was all over the world. Even though in book form, the writings were actually gone. But mouth to mouth, word to word, they still were on Urantia. And they still are today. All over the world. Just a little bit confused now of who brought it through, because they give credit, just like people take a lot of the continuing fifth epochal revelation, claim it as their own, you know. That's the same thing they're doing today. They did this to Van throughout time, aeon. Ever since he came to this planet, his teachings have been stolen. So you can't copyright a truth. It's hard. Even if you try to write it down, some people interpret it another way. They say, oh, no, it's saying this, or it's saying that, and just a few understand what it's really saying. And that's how it's been on this planet forever, since the rebellion. Why? because there have been no supermortals on this planet to say this is how it is. There has been no planetary prince like the good Caligastia, the higher Caligastia, to say this is how it is. And then all over the planet, people who get the message by any means of communication available would then read that and say, oh, the prince has confirmed it. No more was that possible after the rebellion. The Catholic Church, they have this imprint, and it says, that means when you read it, the church has stamped it approved. It's truth, right? We don't have that in many other religious disciplines. We need it back again on this planet. Maybe I'll come up with a print, an imprint. Actually, I do in a way. My symbol, Van. The Masons stole it. Freemasons. They had that imprint right on my finger. And guess what they have in the middle of that V? G. Gabriel. How does that happen? How does that happen? God makes it happen. For us guys who are knocking on the door for truth. And it is written in the New Testament. What's it say in the New Testament? Knock and it will be answered. Seek and you will find. For he who knocks will receive the truth. So you have to keep knocking. So Van influenced many cultures on Urantia, thousands of years before the fall of Caligastia. The book of Genesis talks about the sons of God having relations with the daughters of men. And everybody who's a scholar, metaphysical and spiritual scholar, has their understanding of what that is. Some scholars see this as a negative, but in fact, it's a positive. Just like Adam and Eve were sent to Urantia to give their genetics to humankind, so too the sons of God were chosen to give their genetics to the daughters of the fallen evolutionary races. Not a negative. If you're a reader of the Urantia book, and you probably haven't overlooked this, but there's kind of a contradictory verses in there. I'm not going to get into it right now. But did the Caligastia 100 that fell have relationships with the daughters of men? Or did they not? It's a kind of a controversy. At least it is to me, because it says kind of two different things in different places. But they did. Just bring it right out right now. They did. And it was a good thing, even though they had fallen, and were now following the fallen prince, Caligastia, and Lucifer's concepts. It was good because they had much higher genetics. I mean, for 300,000 years they were loyal. So that they had some loyal genetics in there, even though they fell at the end. They still were higher supermortals. And the evolutionary daughters of the evolutionary races, they benefited from that marriage. It's a good thing. that they chose to marry evolutionary daughters of man and evolutionary sons of man. Both works both ways. There were both male and female that fell in the Caligasti 100, and both the females too, had relationship with the sons of man. Follow me? Because they did give some of their genetics to the evolutionary races. Why doesn't the Urantia book mention that? Well, in a way it does. It does mention that. But there's so much to understand and learn. There's not one book that can bring through the truth. Do you think the Urantia book has all of the truth in it? It even says it's incomplete. That's why continuing fifth epical revelation is coming. Until you send me my best friend, I'd rather spend another night alone. Yeah, I'd rather spend another night alone. For a woman with true beauty, these spiritual eyes to see. For a woman with true beauty has to understand Calvary. I don't need just company, I need the other half of me. And if she